welcome to Mike's Motorworks, and we got Project Black Betty in the shop. John, what's going on?
Well, we started driving it. I got it road ready, put new tires on it, did a transmission service, did the oil change. I did front brakes, pads, rotors, and calipers up front, and the brake hoses just for safety reasons. We did the differential services, but now we're starting to get some minor issues. Transmission is starting to slip a little bit. The knock's starting to progress a little bit more. So it's just one of those things. It's the nature of buying an older vehicle. You never really know what you got until you drive it, and then you kind of figure out what's going on. Good
deal. So, and that's the nature of the beast. And as you saw, we already changed out the fuel system on the last episode. And of course, the link should be on the screen above for that episode. And we flushed it out and what have you. And it ran great after you changed it out. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I drove it for several weekends in a row. And then the transmission just started slipping after we did the service, which you always want to do a good transmission service, especially with this thing sitting as long as it did. So that tells me there's something with the torque converter. Could be a detank cable, the internal transmission that could be causing that torque converter to come in and out. Also causes it to come in and out of fourth gear down to third gear. So it's just one of those things that's been sitting, and it could just be a natural fault in the valve body.
So basically what you're saying then is we got it here because one, we're having problems with the transmission somewhere.
Yep.
And two, we got to figure out where that knock is coming from. And we suspect something, but we can't prove it until we get it up in the air, drop the pan to look at it. And once we get a good look at it, we'll figure out what we need to do. So with that in mind, here is a clip of the knock that we're looking at. I'm going to let that play right now. I bet if I turn this down here, it'll be a lot more apparent. And right behind us, you see a little hose connected here. This is going, what is this thing, Johnny?
This is a vacuum pump. Basically, it's a fluid evacuator to get all the fluid out, so that way this thing does not have a transmission drain plug on it. Some of them do, some of them don't. I don't want to make a mess in Dad's shop, so we're trying to get all the transmission fluid out of it. That way we know when we do drop the pan to get the excess out, I'm not going to make a big mess.
Good deal. Is this one of those fancy name brand ones, or is this something you can pick up from Harbor Freight or
you
from
can get
Amazon?
one anywhere online.
Okay.
I think Dad bought this one on Amazon. The one I got at the shop, I got from a tool truck.
Okay.
So you can pretty much get them anywhere.
Good deal. I'll go ahead and leave a link for one of these from Amazon so that you guys can get an idea of what they look like and how they operate. But what are you finding? What are the results here, Johnny?
Well, I'll go ahead and pull this and get this a little bit closer. You can see this is a clear hose, but it is still, because I did that transmission service, there's a nice little bubble. Let's see if I can get it to stay there. It is somewhat good in red, which is a good sign. If it's any darker than that, then there's something going on internal. Clutches could be burning up, anything like that. The darker the color means either A, lack of maintenance, or you have an internal heat problem.
Good deal. And you already changed out the filter and gave it a flush previously.
Yes.
So this is since that with only the few hundred miles you put on.
Right.
Is that
so
correct?
It is a little bit darker than it should be, considering we just did the service on it. So that tells me that this got some heat issues, which could lead to the torque converter, the clutch inside getting too hot, which is also creating a vibration, which could be caused by the torque converter clutch being warped.
Okay.
So it could be multiple issues internal. The transmission cause vibrations and things like that. That would kind of cause this discoloration of the fluid.
Good deal. Would this be something that you could fix yourself and demonstrate, or would it be easier to maybe get something from a reputable repair repair facility?
Personally, I can rebuild it. Do I want to? Not really. And the reason why is there's a whole bunch of clutch packs in here. This is a 4-speed. So you got planetary gears in the back. You got multiple clutch packs that have multiple cloth material, fiber material, and steel plates that compress. Then you got pistons, internal, valve bodies, seals like that. I can rebuild it. I've got the knowledge. I've rebuilt them before. Do I want to? Not really, because of reliability issues. I know I can rebuild it and not have an issue, but we are planning on pulling a little bit of a load with this, and I prefer buying from a reputable company. Jasper Engines Transmission is where we're going to be getting this transmission from. They offer the best warranty. Our shop is a authorized facility for Jasper, and to me, they're just a superior product.
Good deal. So you're going to go ahead and go with a reman Jasper transmission for this guy, as opposed to doing the work yourself, which is fine. You know, some mechanics, sometimes that's just the easier thing to do, because they are warranted. That way, if there is a problem, you just drop the transmission and boom, there we go. It back. And then we got to look still at the engine itself. Right.
What we're planning on doing, since we've got the transmission out, we're going to go and drain the engine oil, drop the oil pan, and just do an inspection on the main bearings. My experience, based off of my knowledge, it sounds and appears to be the crank bearings, but we won't know for sure until we get into it to find out.
Good deal. So the first thing we need to do then is to drop the transmission so we can get that ready for the new one that's coming in. So what's involved with that process?
Pulling drive shafts, transfer case, the transmission mounts, removing the starter, torque converter bolts, and then basically dropping it out of the way.
Good deal. So we're going to show that to you here on film for those who have never done something like this before. All right, John, so walk us through the process that people are going to see in time lapse.
First things first, the drive shaft. I am going to end up having to replace this yoke because I forgot to mention earlier, we did the exhaust, but the U-joint back here went bad. Oh. So it actually hollowed this U-joint housing, this rear housing. So this pinion yoke's got to be replaced.
I've heard they've been having a lot of problems with U-joints.
Yeah, so what we did just to kind of get it going to see what else we needed is we just took a rigging solution of old hose clamps and cut it down and basically forced it in to get a nice tight fit. So basically we made a shim for it. So the drive shaft has to come out. Once you get the bolts loose, the drive shaft will come out. We got to pull the front drive shaft. There's 8 bolts, 4 in the front, 4 in the back. We got to drop the exhaust up front. The splash shield has to come out in order to get the transmission jack under here, and then it's bolted to the transmission. So this bracket comes out, so we're going to leave this one intact. We're going to clean this up real good, as well as the rest of the plates. There's a couple of electrical connectors for the speed sensors and stuff like that that needs to be taken out. We got
shift linkage?
We got shift linkage here this is the support for the transfer case. It's a secondary support. Linkages up here have to be replaced or removed. There's also right here is the kickdown cable, and that's actually going to get replaced when we replace the transmission. So don't forget about that. That is very important. Transmission lines, and then we can get the bracket out of the way. Get this front support bracket out. The lower bell housing, that'll give us access to the torque converter. The starter is going to have to come down. You don't really have to take the starter down because it actually bolts to the engine itself, not the transmission, and there's enough room when you get this lower housing out. But I do want to get it out, get it cleaned up, and get it tested, make sure it's good, so I won't have to mess with it anytime soon.
Good deal. Someone's going to note the amount of oil. Is that a rear main seal problem? Is that a...
Yes. It's also a mixture of the oil pan.
Okay.
So since we're pulling all this out, we're going to replace the rear main seal, and we got to drop the oil pan to inspect, so we're going to have a new gasket back there.
Good deal. All right, we're going to put this in time lapse and let people watch how that all happens before we get to the point where we drop the tranny.
Yep.
All right. It's another day here, and as you just saw, we have the transmission completely dropped out of Black Betty here. So, John, what's next?
Well, we know we got that knock in there, so the first thing we're going to do, since we got the transmission out, is to go ahead and pull the oil pan out, see what we got going on down there, see if there's any bearing materials, see if we got any play in any of the main bearings, and we're going to go ahead and check the rod bearings also where we got it down.
Sure thing. So that basically means you're going to drop, since the transmission is off, it makes it real easy to access the, well, you don't need to get the flywheel, you just need to turn the crank itself, right?
Right. Well, it's more than just that. It's the transmission is being supported or is attached to the crankshaft because of the torque converter, and everything basically keeps everything real tight. So with that transmission out of the way, it gives a little bit more room to punch out the bearings. Instead of having to drop the entire crank, we could take one at a time and just loosen them up. That way we can push the old bearings out and put new ones in.
Good deal. So let's go ahead and get started, see what we find, and then I have an important question for you about why we're doing it this way as opposed to a different way.
Okay.
So you went ahead and dropped the pan, dropped number 1, number 2, and 3, and then you put number 2 back and 3 back into place just with a snug bolt.
Yes.
Because you got to turn the crank later, is that right?
That's correct.
So did you find anything that would cause as much knock as we were hearing?
Yes, and it's really hard to see. We'll try and get a close-up later, but you can actually run your fingernail. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it, but yeah, this thing is eaten up in multiple spots, and this right here will definitely cause some issues and can cause that knocking.
Exactly. So there was no evidence of the actual bearing slipping, creating the knock. It was just because it was going over these bumps and grooves that you'll see on the camera shot.
That's the way it appears, yes.
All righty. So what's next? What do you got to do?
Well, we're gonna slowly work the rest of the main bearings loose.
Okay.
That way we can kind of get a little more play in between the crank and the block, so we could take some really fine emery cloth and just clean up, not polish, not do anything, just to try and clean that up a little bit. And then we're going to slam some new bearings in.
Good deal. You're going to do the same thing with the connecting rod bearings as well?
Yeah, since we've all got it down, we might as well. I mean, it's not hurting anything. I'm not getting abnormal knocks on a specific cylinder, so we're just doing it because we have the pan off.
Since it's convenient. I got you. Now, someone's going to ask, you know, and I'm not going to knock the guys that favor machine shops, because we love our machine shops.
Oh yeah,
we got a great machine shop in town.
We got a great
work in town. But they're going to ask us, why aren't we having a machine shop do this? Why aren't we taking the whole block out, pulling the crank, letting them polish it, let them go through it, letting them go through the processes? Why are we just using the emery cloth and replacing the bearings thing?
Well, one, we're trying to just to get this thing going, to confirm this is the issue. And we really want to kind of prolong rebuilding or replacing this engine for as long as possible. You know, it's money, things like that.
Right.
You know, these engines getting down, the parts aren't real expensive. but we want to show, and that way we can at least get this thing back on the road and start driving it a little more often.
So you're saying when we get all said and done, this is going to be a temporary fix, not a permanent fix?
Ideally, for me, it's not a permanent fix.
Okay.
This is a temporary. This is, you know, when you go to, you know, a buddy down the road, got a little bit of a knock, he throws this in just to get time out of it.
Okay. So how much life are you expecting to get out of these with the motor then?
Well, based off of the experience that I have doing stuff like this before on a budget for other of my customers at my shop, I've seen them last anywhere from 50,000 miles all the way up to 300,000 miles.
Oh, so we can get quite a bit of life left still out of it.
As long as you get it cleaned properly and make sure there's no other contaminants that can create any other issues.
So it's just like good body work. You got to make sure you do everything perfect. Make sure it's clean and make sure it's down to as best as you can get it, no roundness. And once you're done, you got that foundation set, and you can get some more life out of it.
Exactly.
All right, I'm curious to see what else you can find. So let's catch to the next footage. All right, Johnny, what are you doing at this point? Because we just had a segment where we said, hey, you know, we got to change out the bearings and, you know, clean up the journals. And you were talking about using an emery cloth. Is that what you just shoved up in there?
That is exactly what I just shoved in there. So what you're going to do is get that bearing out. All but one cap is loose. These are just finger tight. The front cap's completely off. The rear cap is completely off. This back cap back here is still factory tight, and this one here is loose. It is just finger tight. So I just shoved the emery cloth in there, and what you're gonna do is slowly, very carefully, work this emery cloth back and forth. You're gonna do it about 7-8 times, turn the crank 90 degrees. Do it again, and just keep doing that very little until that gets polished out.
All right, and the idea is to count so that you don't warp the journal. Is that correct?
Right. And the more you do it, let's just say after the second revolution, you're gonna have to do it a little bit more because the emery cloth is a lot softer than the material. So the coarseness of it is gonna slowly get reduced. So it's gonna be it's not gonna clean up as fast. You can just keep putting fresh emery cloth through to keep it clean, and then you're slowly going to progress down to a finer grit emery cloth.
Good deal. And then, how do you know that you've accomplished your goal of getting the journals clean? Can you do that by sight? You do that by feel? If so, what are you feeling for?
You're basically feeling for making sure it's nice and smooth. Take a small pick and kind of very lightly run across it to see if it's got any kind of abnormalities. But really, truly, the best tool is your fingers. Your fingernails, if you can feel anything in there, it needs to get cleaned up a little bit more.
Good deal. And you do this with both the main rod, or the main crank journals, and you also do the rod bearings as well?
Yes. If you need to do the rod bearings, ideally you want to do it while you're here. But it doesn't have to be done. But yes, you would do the same thing. It'd just be a little bit easier on the connecting rod bearings.
Right, because you can just turn the crank and really easy just see it as opposed to the actual the crank journal itself.
Correct.
All right.
Now, if you do get into some scenarios where you actually got in pretty bad, where these are real kind of minor, they do make oversized bearings. So you would go, 1 thousandths over or 2 thousandths over to compensate for the material taken off.
Right, but you wouldn't be able to judge that on your own. That would be taking the crank down and take it to a machine shop.
Correct.
All right, good deal, good deal. Now, to kind of end the episode, you were thrown a minor curveball that you discovered on this engine. I still have the camera pointed up here, so not great cinematography for the interview part, but can you show us what you found and what you decided to do?
Well, it's really hard to see, and unfortunately it's very difficult. But because it has been sitting for so long, the motor does have 250,000 miles on it. We have started to see some rust concerns. And the rust concerns should not really be there, considering that this was garage kept. And what we're thinking could happen is it could have a very minor crack in the block. The head gasket could be leaking. And it's just something that's been sitting with the miles. This would work. We can get it rolling down the road, but based off of time, finance, it's really kind of a scenario where we need to kind of watch what we're doing. So we're at a kind of a mood point with this engine.
Gotcha. So what you did is, if I could point this out here, I believe it was in the number 8 cylinder is what you were shining the light up in, and you saw rust build up on the wall here of the crankcase itself, correct?
Right. Where the piston wall comes down, you're going to have some spots where it's nice, real shiny from the rings cleaning that area up.
Right.
But right below it, there's quite a bit of rust pitting. And you can actually see the difference because the rust is a reddish color. The oil burning is a brownish color. Under a good natural white light, you can really see the difference. But you can also see on the back side of this crank, you can see where it does have a little bit of rust back there.
Good deal. And you know, inevitably there's going to be somebody that asks, because I asked this myself, is there any natural way that rust would occur in that that moisture would occur within the block, even if in the oil system, that would cause that rusting?
Yes and no. Yes, if it is extremely hot, because it is not 100% sealed system. But the catch is that, with that being said, with the oil coating, you should not have any rust.
Okay.
Because this thing has been driven, it does have the miles on it. The oil does coat enough to prevent any kind of rust.
So all the splash, all the coating, so even if it was sitting in that shed for 5 years, it's still, you know, enough on there where you shouldn't see that problem without it being, that moisture being brought in from somewhere.
Correct.
Okay.
It's completely different than going to a junkyard, pulling the crank off or the oil pan off and seeing rust. Well, that's been sitting in a junkyard where it has had nothing but rain poured on top of it.
Maybe the heads are off or what
right,
have you.
and may not have put the oil cap on. You know, there's a lot of possibilities there. That's why junkyard motors, if they're just sitting around, it's not the best idea to go with that. Now, some junkyards, they put them in a specific building where it can't get wet.
Right.
But naturally, you should not have oil or rust inside the lower portion of the block.
Good deal. So what did you decide to do with the engine then?
We went ahead and ordered a Jasper engine.
Okay.
And the reason why is, yes, we can rebuild this engine and it will run and without any issues. I mean, you've seen us do it on the show before. Mm-hmm. We've built many of motors, but the cost effective versus buying one that is already ready to go.
Right.
You know, this is what I do for a living, and yes, I can rebuild it. It's going to end up costing right at $2,000 to do this thing properly.
Right.
And I can buy a Jasper engine, the stock 350, for $2,800. You know, for an extra $800, I get a 3-year unlimited mile warranty.
Right. So even if you were to drop this and do all the basic work yourself by hand using hand tools, by the time you get the new stuff you need, you're saying that cost-wise, it's just easier to go with, and it's warranted, so you don't have to warranty it yourself.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, taking the heads off, doing it like it's supposed to be done, verifying that the block is not cracked in any way, you know, the machine shop's gonna charge for it. That's, you know, $500 just to do both heads. Then you got the block work, so there's another $300. You know, you're already talking at $1,000 bill just to have the heads and the block verified that it's in good shape. You got head bolts, gaskets, timing chain. You don't know if the cam's in good shape because you won't find that out until you open it up. So your new timing chain, you got to get that deep. You're already there. You might as well replace it based off the miles.
Makes sense for this application.
Yes.
Right. Now, if this was a classic Mopar or something like that with the original block, then you would go
right. If it's numbers matching and you're going 100%, you know, factory original, and you want to keep that numbers matching because it's an antique, yeah, rebuild it. But this is a 1990. Yes, it is a classic here in the state of Florida. It is classified as an antique, but it's 32 years old. You know, so for this vehicle, I think the Jasper engine, for what we're going to be using it for pulling the camper with the new transmission, you know, everything's been serviced. You know, if we want to go on a trip, I can go on a trip with it. So, yeah, I think the Jasper with the better warranty, and if something happens, it's covering a warranty. If I'm out of town, I'm covered.
All right, Johnny, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, we'll get this thing all back together when the motor comes in. We'll put that in, transmission. We may see on the next episode, you know, this thing actually rolling out of the shop and show you some good cleaning and detailing shop things that need to be done.
And we have yet to take a ride in this thing and show this thing on the road. So I think that will definitely make for something great in the future.
Yes, catch us on the next episode.